News breaking this afternoon. Special counsel Robert Hur says he will not be recommending criminal charges in his investigation into President Biden's handling of classified documents. The report, which was released to Congress today, found that the evidence did not establish President Biden's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, and the prosecution of the president was unwarranted. The investigation did find, however, that there was evidence the president, quote, willfully retained documents, some of which were found at President Biden's home in Delaware. The president has said he will not be asserting executive privilege in this case. And just in the past few minutes, President Biden addressing the report at a Democratic retreat in Virginia. Take a listen.
I was pleased to see they reached the conclusion I believed and knew all along they would, that there are no charges should be brought in this case. I was in the middle of handling an international crisis, but I was especially pleased to see the special counsel make clear the stark differences between this case and Donald Trump. As the special counsel wrote, and I quote, several material distinctions between Mr. Trump's case and Mr. Biden's are clear. And by the way, this is a Republican counsel. Most notably, after given multiple chances, this is the continuation of the quote, he returned classified documents and avoided prosecution. Mr. Trump allegedly did the opposite. Bottom line is the special counsel in my case decided against moving forward with any charges, and this matter is now closed.
Just received this report produced by Special Counsel Robert Hur, 345 pages in all, and it details the mishandling of classified documents by the President of the United States. And the bottom line on this report, obviously, the most important part of it is the first line, where he says, we conclude that no criminal charges are warranted in this matter. And he goes on over 345 pages to describe the various ways in which documents were mishandled, including the fact they say that the president willfully retained classified documents after he left the vice presidency, that he kept documents in a home in Virginia that he was renting at the time, that during a period thereafter, he was writing a book and he shared classified documents with a ghostwriter who was helping him produce one of his memoirs, and that during that time, classified documents were shared with that ghostwriter. The special counsel describes some of the evidence that supports some of that information, including the fact that there were recorded interviews, audio files that the ghostwriter provided to the investigators that show the former vice president at the time, President Biden now, of course, that he was sharing information that he knew was classified related to Afghanistan, to his opposition to a troop surge that happened late in the Obama presidency. I will note a couple of things. This was a very, very thorough investigation. According to the special counsel, they say that they looked at, they interviewed 147 witnesses. They reviewed 7 million documents. They found classified documents, Boris and Brianna. They found classified documents not only at the Delaware home of the president, but also at the Penn Biden Center, which is a private a center that the then vice president had established after he left the vice presidency. And also they found him classified documents in about 300 boxes that the FBI searched at the University of Delaware. These were President Biden's papers from when he served in the Senate. One other very important point here, the special counsel goes into chapter and verse of why they're not going to charge the president of the United States. And it's not only because he is the sitting president and there is a DOJ prohibition on charging a sitting president with a crime. What they talk about here is that they believe that the evidence that they have would not be able to sustain a conviction if this was brought before a jury. And one of the reasons why is they say that despite the fact that he did bring these documents home, that the then vice president, when he was talking to his ghostwriter, simply was inadvertent in some of the documents, in some of the sharing of that classified information. They also say that it's clear that Joe Biden has a faltering memory, that he's an old guy. They point that out, and they say that for those reasons, they don't believe that they could sustain a conviction against Joe Biden. I will note one other thing, guys, that part of this investigation, it appears that the ghost writer in this case, who was working with Joe Biden, deleted some audio files that contained important evidence once that person learned that that there was an investigation. So the special counsel looked into the possibility of charging that ghostwriter with obstruction of justice. They said in the end that they decided not to bring charges like that because the ghostwriter ended up cooperating with the investigation, provided additional evidence, including some of the most damning evidence, including these audio tapes that show him talking with the former Vice President Biden about that those classified documents related to Afghanistan. Guys?
Tell us a little bit more, just to refresh for viewers, about Robert Hur, the special counsel here.
Well, Robert Hur he served in Republican administrations. He served as Republican appointee. He served as a former U.S. attorney during the Trump administration in Maryland. He was tapped by Merrick Garland, the Attorney General here, because the then former sitting U.S. Attorney in Chicago, John Lausch, who had been reviewing these documents, the finding of some of these documents in late just over a year ago, that required a special counsel to investigate this matter. And so Robert Hur has now been on the job for about a year. And as I pointed out, they claim that they say that they've done 147 witness interviews, 7 million documents certainly from our reporting with Paula Reed and Caitlin Polans. And we've heard from witnesses that they've been very, very thorough in this investigation. And so we have long expected, Brianna and Boris, that this was going to be a very tough report for Joe Biden. And the inevitable comparisons are going to be made, right, with the Trump investigation, because obviously the fact this report details how Joe Biden willfully retained documents when he was not supposed to after he left the vice presidency. And so the question will be asked, why no charges here versus the charges that have been brought against former President Trump? And Robert Hur, in his report, goes into that. He says that there are a number of factors that make this very, very different, including the fact that Donald Trump refused to turn over documents, classified documents, after he received a subpoena that required him to turn it back over, that there were a number of other obstruction acts by the former president, including telling witnesses to lie and hiding documents when the FBI came to do a search of Mar-a-Lago. So for those reasons, Robert Hur says this is a completely different situation. It's not quite the same thing as the Trump investigation. Guys?
Evan, I want to zoom in on something that you just reported was in the report about this ghostwriter that was helping President Biden write a memoir that apparently had material that was deemed classified and inappropriate for him to have. You mentioned that it was some of the most damning evidence. Is the implication here that evidence was designated as top secret, the highest level of classification?
Right, that is exactly what the report says. The report says that among the documents that were found during the FBI searches were documents at the highest level, which is TS-SCI, right? Top secret, sensitive, compartmented information. And these are some of the highest classifications of documents that exist in the U.S. government. And by the way, the similar level classifications of documents were found at Mar-a-Lago during the FBI search there. So the comparison, of course, is there as well. And a lot of them had to do with Joe Biden's personal notebooks that he took of Situation Room discussions. Part of this was Joe Biden's very, very strong opposition to a troop surge in Afghanistan late in the Obama presidency. And this was a very important thing. The report describes that this was a very important part of Joe Biden's legacy as vice president. It was very well detailed. It's something that he discussed with his ghostwriter. And the ghostwriter produced audio recordings of those discussions, and in one of those discussions, the former vice president at the time, in this recording, says, "I just looked, or I just retrieved these classified stuff downstairs." I don't have it in front of me, the exact wording, but that is the gist of the comment that is made by Joe Biden, then the former vice president, to his ghostwriter. He says, "I just looked at this classified stuff downstairs," and that appears to be, according to this report, the most damning evidence that really investigators found in this case, in this investigation. They go on to point out, however, that they can't establish that the documents were actually being held at the Virginia home that Joe Biden and his family were renting at the time, and there was a number of other factors that lead them to believe that they could not sustain that if they were to try to bring charges against Joe Biden for that particular incident, where he clearly knows that he has classified information from his time as vice president, and was sharing it with his ghostwriter, who was not cleared, who did not have the right clearances to have that information. Again, that's the most, appears to be the most damning piece of evidence that the investigators found in this investigation.
Yeah, no, it certainly is that he knowingly had that information and was sharing it. I want to go now, Evan, if you can just stand by for us as we're following this breaking news. The special counsel out with a report that while he was not president, Biden willfully retained classified information, that he knowingly did so, but that there are not going to be any charges here. I want to go to MJ Lee, who is at the White House for us. MJ, any reaction from the White House?
Brianna, no official reaction yet from the White House or the White House counsel's office. That is the office at the White House has typically referred all questions, including earlier today, related to this investigation. They, of course, have known that this was going to be out any day now because, remember, the White House counsel's office did have time to review the investigation in full for any matters of executive privilege, which it decided not to exert. I know that you've been talking about the two major headlines, which is that no criminal charges are being brought, but also that despite that decision, the investigation uncovered evidence that the president willfully retained and disclosed classified materials. But I think there is also a potentially very damaging political headline that we really need to take a beat to talk about as well. And that is, simply put, that the president is an elderly man with a bad memory. If you look through the report, and I'm just still going through every page of this, but if you go through it, there is a detailed explanation here for why the special counsel's office decided not to bring criminal charges against the president. And at various junctures, the report mentions the president's memory and memory issues being a factor. For example, it says the president's memory was significantly limited, both during his recorded interviews with the ghostwriter that Evan was talking about in 2017 and in his interview with our office in 2023. It also makes a reference at another point in the report, Mr. Biden's limited precision and recall during his interviews, again, with the ghostwriter and with the special counsel's office. It also talks about how President Biden could present himself to a jury as a, quote, sympathetic, well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory. Now, I don't have to tell you that these headlines sort of write themselves as far as sort of the opposition and critics and Republicans are concerned, this has been an area of targeting by Republicans and the president's critics for a while now. You know, even this week, we have been covering the fact that the president has had a number of misspeaks, a number of missteps when he was recalling events from the recent past, when he was talking about meeting with different world leaders, mixing up their names and who they were, who was alive at the time and not. So in this way, I think it is just an important sort of framing and ammunition that this report offers to the president's critics, including, of course, former President Donald Trump. And I should also note, you know, regardless of what this report was going to ultimately say, the details of who did what, who was at fault, any other details revealed in this very, very thorough report, the White House was always sort of fully prepared for critics to weaponize this and use this to go after the president. I think, though, one thing that it does have, the White House has going for it, is that it can now use Robert Hur's own words to draw that contrast between the circumstances surrounding the documents related to President Biden and the circumstances surrounding documents related to former President Trump. If you look here, Robert Hur says that in contrast from Trump, President Biden turned in classified documents to the National Archives and the Department of Justice, consented to the search of multiple locations, including his homes, sat for a voluntary interview. We, of course, know that that happened back in October over the course of 2 days, and in other ways cooperated with the investigation. Now, I have to tell you, the president, of course, is going to face a lot of questions based on the details in this report. And just one big one that comes to mind for me, you know, I was recalling back in January of 2023, this is a year ago, when the news of these classified documents were initially breaking, President Biden told reporters, I was surprised to learn that there were any government records that were taken there to that office. In other words, he suggested that when this came to light, that he was surprised and didn't even know about the existence of these classified documents in his office or his home. But if you look in the report, they cite a 2017 recorded conversation with his ghostwriter where the president himself says, I just found all of the classified stuff downstairs. Now, they say the tone was matter of fact. Perhaps, you know, he was vice president for 8 years. The fact that these kinds of documents were around him for so many years, he might have just, you know, said it in a flippant way and didn't even think that this was remarkable. But again, this is just one of the many questions that the president is going to have to answer or will certainly face in the coming hours.
Yeah, they may try to draw some contrast, but he also, in this report, it says he knowingly retained and shared classified documents, and that is a giant arrow that is going to be used against him there.
Absolutely. MJ, please stand by, because speaking of ammunition for his critics, we want to go to Capitol Hill now, where CNN's Manu Raju is getting responses from House Republicans, including from the Judiciary Committee. Manu, what are they saying?
Yeah, they just issued a statement criticizing the special counsel for not charging Joe Biden with the crime. And this is the comment that came via social media from the House Judiciary Committee led by Congressman Jim Jordan. It says that special counsel Robert Hur recommends no criminal charges against President Biden in the classified documents case. It says despite the fact that Hur acknowledges Biden willfully retained and disclosed classified materials after his vice presidency when he was a private citizen, it goes on to say, quote, double standard. And that is what we can expect to hear from Republicans here in the days and weeks ahead, given that Donald Trump was, of course, indicted in that, you know, over his mishandling and alleged obstruction involving the classified documents that ended up at his home in Mar-a-Lago after he left the presidency. But Democrats are quick to defend Joe Biden, saying that these situations are much different. That is a message that just came from the top Democrat on the House Judiciary Committee, Jerry Nadler, who put out a statement saying that MAGA Republicans will no doubt now call to investigate the investigators. He says that's their favorite move. He went on to say that President Biden cooperated fully with the special counsel, redacted no portion of the report. Unlike Trump, he says Biden has nothing to hide. Nadler goes on to say that there's a contrast between the two. He said if Trump had cooperated, he might have avoided at least some of the 91 criminal charges against him. So you can expect that this is going to be the line of arguments that are going to emerge from Capitol Hill.